Deep in the Pacific Ocean, Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez received the order she had trained for but never wanted to hear: ramming speed. Full ahead. The hijacked nuclear submarine USS Neptune was 6 minutes away from launching nuclear missiles at the west coast. Her attack submarine, USS Warrior, was the only thing standing between 12 million civilians and certain death. As alarms blared around her, Emma realized this wasn't just a mission, it was a suicide run that might save everything she'd ever loved. 18 hours earlier, security alarms had begun wailing throughout Norfolk Naval Base. The USS Neptune, a nuclear submarine supposedly decommissioned 5 years ago, had somehow made it to sea and vanished from all radar systems. What should have been impossible had become America's worst nightmare. Admiral James Carter stood in the emergency briefing room, studying satellite imagery that made his blood run cold. The Neptune wasn't just missing, it had been hijacked by terrorists, and intelligence reports confirmed it was carrying a full complement of nuclear weapons. The submarine that was supposed to be scrapped and dismantled was now the most dangerous weapon on Earth. Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez sat in the command center of the attack submarine USS Warrior, staring at sonar readings that defied everything she thought she knew about submarine warfare. In her 12 years of underwater service, she had never encountered a signal quite like this. The Neptune had surfaced and was broadcasting its position openly, almost as if it wanted to be found. The encrypted message that followed made everyone in the command center hold their breath. The terrorist leader's voice cut through the static with cold, calculated precision. The United States has 6 hours to cease all military operations in the Middle East. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of Los Angeles. Emma's executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Peterson, stood beside her with his face drained of all color. Los Angeles, 12 million people lived there, including his wife, 2 children, and elderly mother. The magnitude of what they were facing began to sink in as the reality of nuclear terrorism became undeniably real. The terrorists had chosen their target with devastating psychological impact. Los Angeles wasn't just a major population center, it was the entertainment capital of America, a symbol of dreams and opportunity. Its destruction would send shockwaves around the world and demonstrate that nowhere in America was truly safe from determined enemies. As Emma reviewed the Neptune's classified files, memories from her past began to surface with uncomfortable clarity. 5 years ago, as a young lieutenant fresh from submarine school, she had trained aboard that very vessel. Commander Marcus Steele had been her mentor, teaching her the intricate art of underwater warfare with patience and expertise that had shaped her entire career. Marcus had been more than just her commanding officer, he had been like a father figure during those crucial early years. He taught her to read sonar signatures like a musician reads sheet music, to anticipate enemy movements through subtle changes in water temperature and current patterns. Under his guidance, Emma had developed into one of the Navy's most promising submarine officers. But Marcus was supposed to be dead. 6 months ago, official reports had confirmed his death in a training accident that had shocked the entire submarine community. Emma had attended his funeral, watched his flag-draped casket being lowered into the ground, and grieved for the loss of a man who had meant so much to her professional development. Now, as she listened to the terrorist demands again, something about the voice in the transmission triggered a memory that made her hands tremble. The speech patterns, the tactical vocabulary, even the underlying tone of authority, it all pointed to an impossible conclusion that she couldn't bring herself to accept. Admiral Carter's voice cut through her troubled thoughts. "Rodriguez, you're the only officer in our fleet with intimate knowledge of the Neptune systems. You trained on that submarine, studied its capabilities, and understand its vulnerabilities better than anyone else currently available." Emma's mouth went dry as the full weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders. If Marcus was really dead, she was probably the only person who could stop the Neptune. But if her growing suspicions were correct, she was about to face the man who had taught her everything she knew about submarine warfare, and he would know her tactics as well as she knew his. In the command center of the USS Warrior, the radio crackled with an update that froze everyone's blood. "Command, this is Recon 7. Neptune has opened its torpedo tubes and is preparing to launch nuclear missiles." "Repeat, Nuclear launch is imminent. Emma studied the sonar display showing the Neptune's position with the analytical precision that had made her one of the Navy's youngest submarine commanders. 47 miles distance, moving at standard cruising speed. Traditional torpedo range was 30 miles maximum, they would need to get much closer. Dangerously closer. Lieutenant Commander Peterson turned to face her with eyes that reflected the magnitude of their situation. "Commander, what are your orders?" Emma took a deep breath and considered their tactical options with the methodical approach that had been drilled into her during years of training. Option 1, long-range torpedo attack from maximum distance. Success probability approximately 30%, but minimal risk of detection. The Neptune's advanced defensive systems would likely intercept most incoming torpedoes before they could cause critical damage. Option 2, close-range torpedo attack from within optimal firing range. Success probability increased to roughly 70%, but with enormous risk of detection and retaliation. The Neptune would almost certainly detect their approach and return fire with devastating effectiveness. Option 3, ramming attack at full speed. Success probability close to 95%, but essentially a suicide mission with no possibility of survival for the crew. The impact would destroy both submarines but guarantee that nuclear missiles could never be launched. Admiral Carter's voice crackled through the radio with urgent intensity. "Rodriguez, Neptune is moving toward Los Angeles. You have 4 hours and 33 minutes before it reaches optimal missile launch position." The weight of 12 million lives pressed down on Emma's shoulders like a physical force. Every decision she made in the next few minutes would determine whether America faced its worst terrorist attack in history or whether she could prevent an unthinkable catastrophe through personal sacrifice. As Emma studied tactical displays and probability calculations, memories of her training with Marcus flooded back with vivid clarity. He had been methodical, brilliant, and surprisingly predictable in his strategic thinking. The man who had taught her submarine warfare had also revealed his own tactical preferences through months of intensive instruction. Marcus had always favored sudden course changes and depth variations as his primary defensive maneuvers. His submarine combat philosophy centered around the principle that the best defense was an aggressive offense. He would never remain in a defensive posture waiting for attacks, he would strike first and strike hard. "Peterson," Emma said, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them, "do you remember Commander Marcus Steele?" "Of course, Commander. He died in that training accident 6 months ago." "No," Emma's voice carried absolute certainty that surprised even herself, "he's alive. And he's controlling the Neptune." Peterson's face registered shock and disbelief. "That's impossible. How could he have survived? We attended his funeral. I don't know how, but I'm certain it's him. And if we're going to stop him, I need to understand how his mind works." Emma recalled Marcus's favorite training scenarios with the clarity of someone whose life depended on those memories. He had always emphasized that submarine warfare was fundamentally psychological. Understanding your opponent's thinking patterns was more important than superior firepower or advanced technology. The man who had taught her everything was now her enemy, and she would need to use his own lessons against him to prevent the destruction of millions of innocent lives. The irony wasn't lost on her, but she pushed emotional considerations aside to focus on the tactical challenge ahead. The USS Warrior executed emergency evasive maneuvers that pushed the submarine and crew to their absolute limits. Emma's quick thinking and superior seamanship saved them from immediate destruction, but their position was now completely compromised. Marcus knew exactly where they were and was moving in for the kill. "Emergency dive. Take us deep." Emma's voice echoed throughout the command center as alarms wailed and emergency lights bathed everything in red. What followed was a deadly underwater chase that tested both commanders' skills to their absolute limits. Marcus pursued Emma through the ocean depths with the relentless determination of a predator who knew his prey intimately. Emma used every evasive tactic she had ever learned, but Marcus anticipated her moves because he had taught her most of them. In the crushing darkness of the deep ocean, mentor and student engaged in a battle of wits and tactics where the smallest mistake would result in instant death. Marcus tried to corner Emma against underwater geographical features that would limit her maneuvering options. Emma focused on escape and evasion while looking for opportunities to turn the tables on her pursuer. "Commander," Peterson reported with barely controlled tension, "our torpedo inventory is running low. Marcus has superior firepower and more ammunition." Emma understood the gravity of their situation with crystal clarity. They couldn't win a prolonged engagement against the Neptune's superior weapons systems. If they were going to stop Marcus, it would have to be through tactics rather than firepower. The psychological pressure was as intense as the tactical challenge. Emma was fighting for the lives of 12 million people, but she was also fighting against the man who had been like a father to her. Every decision carried emotional weight that threatened to compromise her judgment. Marcus knew the USS Warrior was in the area, but he hadn't pinpointed their exact location yet. This gave Emma a small tactical advantage that might be their only hope of preventing catastrophe. Emma maneuvered the USS Warrior through thermal layers that would help mask their sonar signature, using techniques that Marcus himself had taught her years ago. The irony of using his own training methods against him wasn't lost on her, but she pushed emotional considerations aside to focus on tactical necessity. "Commander," the sonar operator reported, "Neptune is moving in a search pattern. He's trying to locate our exact position." Emma studied the tactical display and recognized Marcus's search methodology immediately. Left, right, deep, shallow, systematic and methodical, exactly the pattern he had taught her during training exercises. His predictability might be the weakness she needed to exploit. "We're going to do the opposite of what he expects," Emma murmured to herself. "Marcus is searching the deep water where he thinks we're hiding. We'll stay shallow where he least expects us." The tactic worked perfectly. The Neptune passed 500 meters below the USS Warrior's position without detecting them. Its sonar focused on deeper water where conventional submarine tactics would dictate they should be hiding. Emma allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, but she knew this advantage was temporary. Marcus would soon realize his search pattern wasn't working and adapt his strategy accordingly. She needed to act quickly while she still had the element of surprise. 3 hours and 17 minutes remained on the countdown. Emma waited for the perfect torpedo firing solution, but Marcus kept the Neptune in constant motion, never maintaining a steady course long enough for an accurate attack. An urgent message crackled through the radio: "All units, Neptune is now 2 hours from Los Angeles coastal waters. Immediate intervention required." Emma's time was running out faster than she had anticipated. The window for a successful torpedo attack was closing rapidly, and soon they would be forced to choose between desperate measures or watching millions of people die in nuclear fire. "Peterson, prepare torpedo tubes 1 and 2. Range is still marginal, Commander. Our hit probability remains low. We don't have any other options." Just as Emma was about to give the firing order, the sonar operator shouted a warning that made everyone's blood run cold: "Commander, Neptune has detected our position. Incoming torpedoes." 3 hours and 17 minutes remained on the countdown. Emma waited for the perfect torpedo firing solution, but Marcus kept the Neptune in constant motion, never maintaining a steady course long enough for an accurate attack. An urgent message crackled through the radio: "All units, Neptune is now 2 hours from Los Angeles coastal waters. Immediate intervention required." Emma's time was running out faster than she had anticipated. The window for a successful torpedo attack was closing rapidly, and soon they would be forced to choose between desperate measures or watching millions of people die in nuclear fire. "Peterson, prepare torpedo tubes 1 and 2. Range is still marginal, Commander. Our hit probability remains low. We don't have any other options." Just as Emma was about to give the firing order, the sonar operator shouted a warning that made everyone's blood run cold: "Commander, Neptune has detected our position. Incoming torpedoes." 1 hour and 45 minutes remained when Emma realized conventional tactics would not be sufficient to stop the Neptune. Marcus was too skilled, too well-equipped, and too determined to be defeated through traditional submarine warfare. Marcus's voice came through the radio with a tone that mixed authority with genuine regret. "Emma, surrender now. I don't want to kill you, but I will if you force my hand." "You're not the Marcus I remember," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil she felt inside. "No, I'm the Marcus who finally sees the truth about what our country has become." Emma considered a final tactical option that was so dangerous it bordered on suicide. It would require sacrificing safety protocols and pushing their nuclear reactor beyond safe operational parameters. The USS Warrior would essentially become a guided missile aimed at the Neptune's hull. "Peterson," Emma said quietly, "prepare the reactor for emergency overload procedures." "Commander, that's extremely dangerous. If we lose containment, it's the only way to stop Marcus." Emma began overriding nuclear safety protocols that had been designed to prevent exactly what she was attempting. She was turning the USS Warrior into a weapon of last resort, gambling everything on one final desperate attack. Emma made the decision that would define her legacy and determine the fate of millions of people. To stop the Neptune, she would have to sacrifice the USS Warrior and potentially her own life. All personnel, abandon ship to escape pods immediately. "Commander, what about you?" Peterson asked, though he already knew the answer from the determination in her eyes. "Someone needs to stay behind to control the ramming maneuver. Ensure the impact is precise enough to disable Neptune's nuclear capabilities." Peterson understood with devastating clarity what Emma was proposing. She was going to sacrifice herself to save 12 million strangers. The mathematics of heroism demanded one life to preserve millions. "Commander, there has to be another way." 12 million people, Peterson. 12 million innocent lives. Emma methodically verified that all crew members had safely evacuated to escape pods before sealing herself alone in the command center. The silence was deafening after hours of urgent activity and shouted orders. In the solitude of impending sacrifice, Emma composed her final message to Marcus. "Marcus, this is the last maneuver you taught me during training. You always said, sometimes the only solution is to sacrifice yourself for the greater good." Emma pushed the USS Warrior to maximum speed on a direct collision course with the Neptune. Marcus realized Emma's plan at the last possible moment, but it was too late to avoid the impact that would change everything. "Emma, no." Marcus's anguished cry came through the radio with genuine horror and regret. "I'm sorry, Marcus. There's no other way." The collision between the two submarines created a massive underwater explosion that shook the ocean floor and sent shock waves for miles in every direction. The Neptune's hull sustained critical damage, but the submarine wasn't completely destroyed in the initial impact. Emma assessed the damage to both vessels from her position in the USS Warrior's flooding command center. Her submarine was sinking rapidly, but it still had limited maneuvering capability for a few more minutes. Marcus's voice came through the radio, broken and filled with emotion. "Emma, you saved me." "What do you mean?" "The collision damaged the Neptune's weapons control systems. I can't launch the nuclear missiles. You saved me from becoming a mass murderer." In the aftermath of the collision, Marcus revealed the horrifying truth about what had happened to him 6 months earlier. The training accident that supposedly killed him had actually been a cover story for his forced recruitment into an experimental military program. Advanced mind control techniques had been used to turn him into an unwilling weapon for a terrorist organization with connections inside the American military establishment. The Marcus who had planned to destroy Los Angeles wasn't acting entirely of his own free will, he had been psychologically manipulated and programmed. Emma's ramming attack had damaged more than just the Neptune's hull. The collision had disrupted the electronic implant in Marcus's brain that had been controlling his thoughts and actions for months. For the first time since his supposed death, he was thinking clearly and remembering who he really was. "Emma," Marcus said, his voice filled with gratitude and horror at what he had almost done. The collision damaged the control implant. I can think clearly now. But it may be too late. Neptune is critically damaged and sinking. Emma checked her sonar display to assess Marcus's position and condition. Marcus, do you have access to escape pods? Yes, but Emma, what's your status? How badly is the USS Warrior damaged? Emma evaluated her own submarine's condition with the clinical assessment of a professional naval officer. Critical damage throughout multiple compartments, but still capable of reaching the surface if she acted quickly. Emma spotted Marcus's signal flickering on the sonar screen and immediately pushed the battered USS Warrior toward his position. The submarine groaned under the strain, alarms blared across the reactor room, and seawater hissed as it forced its way through ruptured seams. But Emma refused to give up. Commander, Peterson's tense voice crackled through the comms, Warrior's condition is critical. We're not sure how much longer the reactor will hold. Should we attempt to surface? Emma's eyes scanned the control panels. Main power reserves were down to 15%, and auxiliary systems were barely functional. But the engine still answered her commands. Not yet, she replied firmly. We surface only after we get Marcus back. Through the forward viewport, she caught sight of a faint silhouette, the damaged escape pod ejecting from the shattered remains of the Neptune. Slowly, it drifted upward toward the distant sunlight. Emma maneuvered the Warrior closer, the submarine's frame shuddering under the effort. Minutes later, Marcus's capsule broke the surface, and Emma guided the Warrior alongside it. The stormy Pacific tossed both vessels, but Emma's hands remained steady on the controls. Over the radio, her voice softened. "Welcome back, Commander," she said. A weak but grateful voice answered, "Thank you, Emma. You didn't just save me. You saved me from myself." The recovery crew pulled the capsule close, securing Marcus at last. When the hatch opened, he looked worn, scarred, and broken, but his eyes met Emma's with recognition and shame. "Marcus," Emma asked quietly, "what happened out there? What did they do to you?" His voice trembled, heavy with guilt. 6 months ago, that training accident wasn't an accident at all. It was a staged cover. They forced me into a classified program, experimental implants, psychological reconditioning, neural manipulation. They turned me into something I never wanted to be, a weapon. Emma froze, struggling to process his words. Who did this to you?" "A covert faction within the military-industrial complex. They used my anti-war stance as an excuse, said it proved I was susceptible. They wanted me to be their pawn, a terrorist they could control. And Emma," his voice cracked. "If you hadn't stopped me, millions of innocent lives would already be gone." 3 weeks later, at Bethesda Military Hospital, Emma and Marcus lay in adjacent rooms. Emma's arm was in a cast, and Marcus bore the long, raw scars where the implant had been surgically removed. For the first time in months, he was truly himself again. When Admiral Carter arrived with a retinue of officers and reporters, the mood shifted instantly. "Commander Rodriguez," the Admiral said solemnly, "your sacrifice didn't just save 12 million lives. Thanks to the intelligence Marcus provided, we've dismantled the organization behind the mind control program." Emma gave a small shake of her head. "I only did what was right, Admiral." "No," Carter countered, his voice firm. "You redefined what heroism means. You're being recommended for the Congressional Medal of Honor." Emma turned away. "I don't want a medal. Knowing Marcus is free of their control is enough." Marcus, his voice hoarse but steady, looked at her with deep gratitude. "Emma, even when I was under their influence, I could still hear your voice somewhere inside me. It was the only thing that kept me from breaking completely." When Emma was discharged, she found Marcus in the hospital corridor. He was walking on his own again, but his future was complicated: legal hearings, psychological treatment, endless rehabilitation. Emma, he asked, hesitant, what happens now? To the world, I'm still technically a traitor. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. No, Marcus. You're a victim. And I'll stand by you. His eyes filled with tears. Why? Why would you still trust me after everything? Because, Emma said softly, on that submarine, I saw the real Marcus, the man who trained me, the man who never gave up. You were always there, even when they tried to bury you. Marcus was finally cleared of all charges. Therapy had been long and grueling, but he was free. Emma visited him in a small seaside town, where he now lived in a quiet house overlooking the waves. Will you ever return to the submarines? She asked. Marcus smiled faintly. No. I think I've had enough of the deep. I prefer the surface now. What about you? I'm going back, Emma said, her eyes bright. Not as a commander, but as a teacher. I'll train the next generation, not just in tactics, but in values. They need to know that integrity matters as much as victory. Marcus chuckled softly. Perfect. You were always the best teacher. You gave me the most important lesson of my life. Emma tilted her head. And what lesson was that? That true friendship is stronger than any chain, stronger than any control. They stood together on the porch, watching the sun melt into the horizon. The Pacific stretched out before them, not as a battlefield but as a canvas of peace. For the first time in years, both Emma and Marcus felt that the future could finally be theirs, and that's Emma Rodriguez's final countdown, the sacrifice that saved 12 million lives. Here at Last Signal Stories, we believe every soldier's final message deserves to be heard. If this story of courage, friendship, and ultimate sacrifice moved you, hit subscribe for more military stories. Drop a comment below, what would you have done in Emma's situation? Until next time, stay tuned for the signal.